Whether you're outside grilling, changing diapers, or just trying to catch a breath, the Young Dad Podcast is your spot for real conversations about fatherhood, manhood, and everything in between. I'm your host, Jay, and I sit down with dads, experts, and everyday men to talk about the joys, the struggles, and the lessons that come with raising kids and building a meaningful life. From mental health and relationships to faith, family, and the funny stuff only dads understand, YDP is here to remind you that you're not doing this alone. So grab a juice box, grab a snack, kick back, and join the conversation because fatherhood doesn't come with a manual, but it should come with a podcast. What happens when the person who's supposed to be the rock of the family is falling apart inside? Most people think postpartum depression is a mother's issue and just hers. But today's guest knows the truth. Dads struggle too. And far more than anyone talks about, she spent years in birth rooms, living rooms, and NICU hallways supporting families through the rawest, hardest, and moments of parenthood. This conversation isn't just about birth, it's about the emotional crash after. It's about the dads who break quietly. It's about the moms who blame themselves. And it's about the families who deserve support long after the baby's born. Because postpartum doesn't just impact one person, it impacts everyone. So whether you're outside grilling, mowing the lawn, changing dirty diapers, or maybe, just maybe, you finally got a moment to sit back, relax, and put your favorite podcast up on the YouTube, on the TV. Thanks for being here, and thanks for listening to your favorite show. Today's guest is Suzy, back again, a Seattle-based birth and postpartum doula, childbirth educator, and advocate for empowered, safer, and more informed birth experience. Her journey into birth work began after realizing how deeply families needed not just medical support, but emotional and mental support during pregnancy, labor, and postpartum. She has supported countless families through birth, recovery, trauma, and the confusing, overwhelming transitions that happen once the baby arrives. Suzy brings a unique lens to postpartum care, one that includes mothers, fathers, and the entire family unit. She's passionate about talking openly about parental postpartum depression, the systemic barriers facing families, and the gentle, grounding ways we can help parents thrive instead of suffer in silence. So, when you're ready, go ahead and grab your juice box, grab a snack, and let's jump in to today's conversation. And welcome Suzy back to the conversation. Suzy, welcome back.
I know. I am so excited to be here and to be talking about this topic. I think I teared up a little bit in that intro because it is true that this transition affects everybody, right? And so often fathers are left out. So thank you for being here, for having this podcast, and for being willing to talk about this topic, which so often feels almost taboo, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is. It is unfortunate that that's the case, but I'm happy to talk about it. But first, let's talk about you. You posted yesterday on your Instagram. You've had a busy 2025. Divorce, kids growing, starting a business, falling in love, hundreds of births attended. So let's just kind of go back and talk about what drew you into the work that you're doing now, kind of how you got started in it, and kind of where your passion for it lies.
Yeah, well, I actually started my career in economics and finance, and I loved being a numbers person. I could look at spreadsheets all day. I did that until I had my first daughter, Zoe, and her birth was wild. It was an emergency C-section. 6 weeks after she was born, we moved for my ex-husband's job. And, you know, I suffered a lot of postpartum depression, and looking back, I think he probably did as well. We were both very isolated. And at some point after her birth, in that period where I was staying at home, I became very good friends with a student midwife. And as I was learning her stories, I was like, wow, like, one, we're not the only family struggling in this period. And two, there is better support than what we received. I think the way her system was set up, her family she worked with just had a lot more support. And so when I had my second daughter, Hazel, a few years later, I had more support. We had more support. We had a much better birth. We had a much better postpartum. We had a much better recovery in general. And that's when I decided to do my doula certification and try to work in caring out for these families in ways that are beyond just clinical. And since then, I've gotten to work with a couple hundred families, a lot of families who have had their second and even third baby with me. And it's such a gift to be with families and it's such a beautiful and also vulnerable time.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's so cool that how you got into this and the work that you do because it is impactful, right? There's so much support that's needed in this time for families. for both parents, as they enter into, this next phase of their life, whether it's their first, second, third, it is like a new phase every single time that they're entering into.
It's wild. Even with second babies and third baby, it's like, "Oh, we've been through this before," but it's definitely different.
Mhm. Yeah. No, and I just think it's cool what you do. I think it's impactful, and I think it's important. So what does, like, full picture support, like, look like for you in the work that you do?
Yeah. So I work with families before, during, and after birth. So typically we'll meet a few times before birth. We're talking about labor coping strategies, what their birth plan is, how do you stay healthy and well while you're doing something very difficult. After that, I'm with families through their entire birth, offering emotional, physical support. And that could be helping moms remember their breathing practices, advocating for them in the hospital. Patient advocate is a really good, maybe more familiar role for or explanation of what a doula does, especially at a hospital birth. So I'm with them through that entire journey of getting their baby here. Usually I'm the first person to meet them in their home, the last person to leave after their baby's here. I guess they're still in the hospital. And then I typically do 24 hours of postpartum care in the home. So that's helping answer the questions that they have about, when you're like sleepy and bleary eyed and your baby it's not getting enough food. It's that lactation support. It's taking over a couple feeds if the baby is using a bottle, doing some co feeds with the mom who's struggling with latches, cooking some meal, holding the baby that needs to be, won't sleep unless it's touching somebody's body so the parents can get sleep, taking care of the house, kind of just being an extra set of hands in this time where it's like you need extra hands that support whatever your vision of postpartum is.
Definitely. And so why that first 24 hours, though? Why is that so important?
Okay, so I'm not typically with them the first 24 hours. It's 6 4-hour visits over
Gotcha.
a couple weeks or months. Yeah, thanks for
Gotcha.
clarifying that.
Makes sense. If people do wanna go back, they can go back on any podcast platform, look for episode 169 of the podcast. A lot of good stuff in that episode that kinda is the precursor for a lot of things we're gonna talk about today. But, of course, I wanna kinda talk about you a little bit, kinda refresh people on kinda what you do without getting too deep into it. Um, but, yeah, when we think of postpartum depression, we primarily think about the mothers. Right? We
Mhm.
don't really talk about dads, and we don't really talk about that side of it at all. They're often ignored. I mean, trust me, I would know, you would know. I've been in hospital rooms to where it's like the dad's almost ignored completely, and the focus is on the mother, which a lot of the time, us dads will say, "Oh, that's fine," kind of thing. One thing that also gets to me though is beyond like postpartum care in like hospital settings. So over the summer, and this just kind of gives us some context, but over the summer, my oldest daughter had her appendix removed,
I'm so
and the the medical staff was just like all about like talking to the mom, asking her the questions. Like I was literally standing right there, and I felt like I wasn't even in the room.
Mhm.
I was getting pissed off, and it's like I didn't nothing. Like they just ignored me, pretend like I wasn't there, talked directly to her. I was like, "Excuse me, like I'm literally right here."
Right, and it's such a terrible assumption that, I sometimes okay, I'm gonna back up for just a moment because last time we talked a little bit about, like, how much more likely fathers are to be, one, to suffer, like, extremes, like, it's so much more common for suicide and being so depressed that you're making that, like, ultimate loss, and
Mhm.
as a woman, I learned in my doula training that suicide is the number 1 cause of death for mothers in the postpartum period, and I was really surprised to find out that that happened, like, 3 times more that fathers were 3 times more likely to be so depressed that that's what they chose, and after that, that really opened my eyes to how I interacted with families, and I started realizing that I was doing the exact same thing, that my prenatal appointments were focused on the mother, and it was great if the dad was there, but it wasn't even like I would encourage a family to come to those appointments together, and sometimes the dad would have very little to say. And after that episode, I did a lot of self reflection on that and realized, like, wait, I'm the leader of this appointment. And I started asking dads more questions. And it turned out that it was 100% on me, that I realized that I was part of that problem because I would ask mom what she wanted and what her feelings were and what her fears and worries and what she was excited about and what she hoped she remembered 3 years in the future. But I wouldn't ask dads that same question. Or if they did, if they like struggled for words, I wouldn't give them time to think or to kind of challenge them to be a part of the conversation. And once I started doing that, I was really surprised that a lot of times, one, dads had these very heartfelt answers that I can't believe I went years not hearing or listening to. And two, that you could see the surprise in a lot of their eyes when they're like, oh, wait, you are genuinely curious about my experience in this life changing moment as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think it's important because it's like, do beyond, like, yourself, like, it's a mutual thing, right? Like, they're both these parents are gonna be responsible for the child, they're both gonna be a part of the process, they've both been a part of the process, but then so often, like, fathers are kind of just like, "Whatever, if you're there, great, if you're not, well, who cares?" Kinda thing. And it definitely comes from I wouldn't say definitely, but I think it comes from, like, just long systemic issues, all going back, and I think there's ties to it that all go back to, like, the welfare state and that go, like, really deep, but I mean, fathers have never really not never. There was a time where fathers really mattered in the picture, and then they were phased out of the picture very slowly, and now it's like, well, if you're a part of it, great, if you're not, then, no one's surprised kinda thing. No one's surprised if a mom just goes to her appointment alone, kinda thing. I think more people are surprised when the dad actually does go to the appointment and does make an effort to take work off or does say something during the appointment, kinda thing. Because I mean, the number one person that should be there for the mother is, of course, the father, right? Because that's the person that's there with her, every day, like, talking to her like, "Okay, you had cramps, like, the last 4 days. Probably wasn't normal," or, "This happened," kinda thing. 'Cause not all the time, like, when we're in those settings, like, does anyone wanna speak up kinda thing, and you have to really push to make sure things are said, and that's our duty as husbands too, is to protect our wives and to say those things and speak up for her and to help her and support her, and so if we're not there, or if you're not there as a father, then, there's a big part that's gonna be missing, and plus it's a great time to bond, that's a great time to show that you care, you're invested, and that you're on board with everything going on too.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember very vividly a family that I have had the privilege of working with multiple of their babies. And the first time I worked with them, I was actually going through my own divorce. And I remember sitting with them and being so in awe of the love that they had for each other, the way they supported each other, just, those couples that you're around and you're like, oh my God, you are so in love. It's almost nauseating. And also like feeling such a deep jealousy at the time because I was really far on the opposite end of the spectrum in the middle of a divorce. And I was with them through their birth. It was lovely. It was beautiful for their first child. And then I had the gift of being with them through their second child, their second birth, and it was such a different experience where when I came to do their at first in the birth prep, it was very different, very like they were very all of a sudden disconnected. I would never have known, like if I didn't keep a journal, I didn't have that memory that they had once been so insanely connected and in sync. And when I was there doing their postpartum visits, literally, it was like they were ghosts to each other, kind of like walking around the house, but almost trying to like clearly existing in two completely different worlds. And that was when I was like, oh my God, we need to talk about this because so often I think as women, so much is happening to our body in pregnancy. We're like literally being invaded. Like it feels like a little alien is taking over your body. And we have such high expectations for being able to be a little bit messy, a little bit rough. We know we're going to have our good days and our bad days. And we have high expectations for the people around us to accept that. And I think we also have high expectations for our main support person to be perfect in that, to love unconditionally, to continually give, to never have their own ups and downs. And all of a sudden, if a dad has like a down day, it seems like that can very quickly cascade into a down week, into both partners being more disconnected. And that if a mom has postpartum depression, it's understood she needs love and compassion and support and acceptance and help. But if a dad has postpartum depression, it's like, what's wrong with him? He's not contributing. Instead, and I think that that needs to be talked about because one, it's not fair for fathers. And two, we need to take care of the people that we love. Like, even if it's a vulnerable moment for us as women carrying a child, breastfeeding is hard, feeding a baby is hard. Some of that work can't necessarily be shared 50-50. That there still has to be these open conversations about what help do we need and how is the other person doing and how are we coming together as a unit in this time.
Yeah. No, and I think it's, you know, I think it is important to make sure that we're coming together and both sides, like, understand, like, yes, like, you should have high expectations, but also I think you also have to have realistic expectations, right? Because over that time where, like, you're pregnant and stuff, you're, like, going through the pregnancy, I think that's when dads really start to, like, burn out and things like that, and it doesn't start just after the baby's born, it starts well before, um 'cause it's not just a sudden, like, snap of the fingers, baby's born, mom and dad are both depressed, right? That's not how it works. That's not how depression works. It's a cycle over a period of time, and I think it's very easy for it, like you said, to cascade because then again, no one really cares. No one really, like, checks in. There's not as much support there, right? Like, during those baby appointments, like, mom's checked in on, they're checked in on, they're talked to, they're talking about all the things, right? And then dad's just there trying to do all the things, and if dad suddenly doesn't wanna do something, even though, there's all these expectations, and I think that's the part that really, I think, gets to a lot of men, is just the never-ending list of expectation, right? The never-ending list of, well, she's pregnant, so if she has a craving, you gotta go up at, like, 1 in the morning, go get her whatever she wants, or you're gonna get up in after you've already fallen asleep and get her something, or, do this, do that, do this, do that, do this, do that, on top of all the other do this, do that, do this, do that expectations that are already present for men, kinda thing, and it's just a never-ending list, and it is exhausting, kinda thing.
Yeah, and emotional work is work. I think as women feel like we're sometimes the conversation feels like we own that exclusively. And as I've for the past like year and a half, as I've been talking more with dads and checking in more on the dads I work with, I've realized it's not that whatever mental load we are carrying, that most dads at some point are. And then sometimes you get through, I know even with me when I was in the middle of my worst depression, that there were times like I did check out of the relationship because I was in survival mode. And I can recognize that now looking back that like, yeah, I was in, I had to do what I had to do to take care of myself, but dads have to do the same thing. Like, if a mom goes into survival mode, is it possible for a dad to also be in that mode? And how do you come out of that together and get the help you need before it's too late and you're 1,000 miles apart from each other?
It's because dad's already very much in that place. I think dad goes first. I wouldn't say that's always the case, but I think it's gonna be more common that dad's gonna go first, but I did wanna share s
You're 100% right in that.
yeah, that's the only reason it happens is because now mom realizes, like, he's not here all the way kinda thing, so yeah, I think it's one then the other kinda thing, and I think that's how it happens most, if not all the time. I'll give it like a 99 just for that off chance, but
Yeah. Well, and I was really surprised when I was doing research for this podcast because I always like to have like a couple like statistics, even though it's not as interesting as the stories. But it's 1 in 10 fathers that are diagnosed with postpartum depression.
mhm.
And my guess is that it's probably a lot more. Um,
Yeah, I would say it's 1 in 3. honestly, because it's just the weight. It's the weight of the expectations. It's the weight of the knowledge, it's the weight of all the things that come with it, right? Like, a lot of times, I don't feel that women think about it as much as men, like the weight side, like the bills, the time, the and just like all the I think they think about the women think about the commitment and that stuff, right? Like the raising of the kid, right? But dads think about like the everyday stuff, like the money, the bills, the time, the doctors, the all of that side of it, right? The everyday stuff. And I think that's where that load really starts to feel heavy on a lot of men.
Do you mind me asking you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
If a woman is thinking about wanting to watch out for her partner, her husband, her boyfriend, whatever their relationship is through pregnancy, how can she tell the difference between somebody who is maybe starting to check out because they're feeling like they're carrying a weight that's, like, literally too much
Mhm.
versus somebody who doesn't care? Because I think that's how we interpret things is like, "Oh, if they're checking out, they don't care."
Yeah.
And I think it's often the opposite where it's like they care so much, but there's only so much you can do, and then you're in the cycle of, like, it's really hard to be in that
Yeah.
p
No, no, 100%. Well, I will say there are some signs that are overlooked, and I'm glad you asked this question because this is exactly where I want to transition to next. Hold on. My cat's, like, meowing at me, but she doesn't want me to grab her. So I will say, so these are some signs that I think anyone can look out for the men that are, going through a pregnancy. So, number 1, and I don't think these are in any particular order. I don't have them in any order, but most like, subtle withdrawal instead of obvious sadness. So it's a very subtle withdrawal. Most dads don't look depressed, however, they're gonna look busy, distracted, or checked out. They stop doing the small things, so they're not cracking as many jokes, they're not initiating as much family time, they're texting texting friends back, or they're not texting friends back as much. Um, Loved ones usually chalk this up to being tired or stressed from work. Um Next is irritability. So more irritability. More moms will present with sadness, while dads will often present with anger, impatience, a shorter fuse, frustrations. And this is often misread that he's grumpy or he's stressed, not realizing irritability is one of the primary mental health red flags for men. So if he's suddenly more irritable over like small things, like his mood's very liable. I think that's something to look out for. Overworking or over functioning, so a lot of overwhelmed dads hide in productivity. They're working longer hours, they take on more projects or obsess over chores. So it
my
looks
god.
responsible or even admirable, but it's often a subtle escape from feeling inadequate at home. So it's often just more of an escape by taking on like doing these different things to kind of like hide like the things that you're feeling because it looks on the outside to everyone else like, it looks like I'm being responsible, looks like I'm doing good, looks like I'm just, putting my head down, working, things like that. So it's an easy kind of cope. A missed sign is
I think
also
that
when
one really affects women too. I have so many questions for you about that because when I talk with mothers in the postpartum, they have a lot of feels about their partners being at work a lot. They're like, "I appreciate it, but I also miss him and I'm lonely," and then they go into being resentful about it. I'm glad that you mentioned that one because it's one that if it's talked about early, can probably be like a sign like, "Hey, we need to get help and we need to come back together." But if it's like years go by, then it's much harder to,
yeah,
I don't know, work back. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's something that I mean, all these things you have to catch early to help them from sliding. Couple more too is a missed sign is when providing becomes the only thing a dad puts his identity to. So hobbies kind of go away, rest feels guilty, joy gets quiet, and often he has like tunnel vision um, to where he's just focused on just providing, right? He's not really doing anything else, just focused on providing, and that's where his whole identity is.
Okay, I never would have guessed that that was a sign of depression, by the
Mhm.
way. I had
Yeah.
no idea.
Yeah. Well, it's because for that one, if we're kind of talking, if I want to talk that one through, it's more like, and comments are going to be made where it's like, oh, I don't got time for that because I got to provide for my family, or I got to do this, or I got to, pay for the next thing. things become more about, like, just providing and doing the providing than anything else, and that kinda becomes the most important, and so he starts to lose, like, the things that he enjoys more
Mhm.
so, right? Or he feels guilty, like, "Oh, I can't take the time to watch football on Sunday because, that's gonna be a wasted time, and, I don't got that time to waste," and things like that. And then most dads won't say, "I'm struggling," straight up, they just won't. They say things like, "I just need to get it together, I'm fine, it's just a lot, I don't wanna be a problem, I just need to focus on work right now, I need to focus on, these projects that I got assigned at work," and things like that. So, there's gonna be a really big internal narrative focused on, like, pressure, shame, believing that he has to do it alone. It's usually one of the earliest indicator that something deeper is going on. So, between these 5 things, it's some of the earlier stuff that's going on. And I think when it comes to work, I mean, uh, even with men who are having children in 2025, 2026, and beyond, right? Those are mostly like millennials. I don't think Gen Z is having very many babies, at least not on purpose. Their brains are too rotted. I think that so it's a lot of millennials. It's a lot of people who are in their 30s, 30s, 40s, right? Not a lot of people in their 20s. Um, but they've always been taught that work is the identity, right? They've always been taught that work is the thing I need to do, and they don't really realize that the more you're working, the less you're with your partner during this time, and, like, she wants you to be there kinda thing. And I think men have to realize at the same time that, reason that she wants you to be there is because there's only so much time left. It's kinda like a ticking clock, and I think that's what's going on in her mind. More so, it's like there's a ticking clock of time that's slowly ticking down. Every week that goes by, it's like, "Okay, we're 1 week closer to things changing and a big change happening," kinda thing. So I think for women, it also shows up more so as anxiety than anything else, as an early indicator.
So, one thing that I see with the families I work with is that a lot of times when you come home from the hospital, families are trying to breastfeed. There's a lot of pressure right now to breastfeed, which is wonderful because breast milk does help with the immune system and it has so many antibodies and growth factors that you don't get from formula. But it's something that if you're breastfeeding, pretty much only the mother's doing. And
Mhm.
so, one thing that I see with my families is that as a mom, a family comes home from the hospital, the mom is thrown into this work that's hard, challenging, causing sleep deprivation. She wants to share the work, but they're afraid of bottles, which I personally think pumps and bottle feeding are like an amazing tool that we have now and should be
Yeah.
used.
Yeah, use
Uh,
it.
but she's getting thrown into this very connected time with her newborn, where even as a doula, I was trained to view them as like a dyad, an inseparable duo, where you can't treat one without treating the other. For some reason, we were not taught about dads in this picture. But what I see with a lot of my families is moms come into this like very intense relationship and very high demands from their newborn. They want to share the work. They don't know how to share the work. Dads, once I've started talking more with dads, asking how they're doing, in with dads, the things that they're telling me is like, I don't know how to be connected in this. The baby just wants mom. I'm holding the baby. Every time I hold the baby, they cry and I don't know what to do. And I've literally had dads cry like these beautiful tears about like these experiences the first time they feed the baby or, like they want, like clearly it is meaningful for them to be involved. But when that doesn't happen because, you're trying to do the best thing for your baby and you're just trying to be like exclusively breastfeeding and mom's almost going into this like crazy, it's not sustainable to be up every 2 hours every night for
Mhm.
months on end. And dads don't know what to do. And so they're withdrawing and they're focusing on work and they're doing all the things that you just said. And then at month like 3 or 4, they're like in completely different worlds.
Yeah.
What, are there any like words or phrases? Because one of the things that moms ask me that I feel like I don't have an answer to is that they don't know how to vocalize. Like I need your help, and they also don't know, like, what they can ask. They expect their partners to know, but even they don't know, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is, like, a really unfair expectation of expecting somebody else to guess what you need, which is great to have your needs anticipated, but if you don't even know what they are, how is somebody else supposed to know what they are?
Percent. Yeah, I think that that's where expectation comes from. We talk about, what did I say earlier? Like where we talk about, you know, the high level expectations, and then we talk about realistic expectations. Realistic expectations, I think, is where you need to be. You need to be in realistic expectation because you need to be in the expectations that, okay, well, he doesn't know what I need, kind of thing, right? He's also never been through this. And so you have to realize, like, that's realistic and that, yes, he can anticipate a lot of, like, your needs. He could probably tell when you're hungry or tired, things like that, and he can anticipate that stuff. But he doesn't anticipate anything that you're going through with this. He doesn't anticipate anything with the baby kinda thing. Even though it does come very naturally to people. I think once you
They
have that
do
baby,
it. It is, but some dads are not even allowed to be around their baby because the mom's just, like, breastfeeding and has even if
well, I think
she's
that's
raising.
wrong. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I think that's wrong
Well,
because, I
they're set up
mean,
that way, though, from our, like, childbirth classes, and yeah,
yeah, and
I would agree with
I
you.
think the system's broken in that way. I think the system's absolutely broken in that way because you just mentioned, like, you're to treat the mom as a baby as one, but then dad's not even mentioning that, like, why kinda thing. It's like, dad plays such a huge part. I mean, and I think that goes back to a lot of systemic issues. You go back to when the nanny state was created, Lyndon B. Johnson, instead of inviting mothers to not have the fathers in the home, things like that, and that just kinda grown and developed into what is, like, taught today, kinda thing. And it's not it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. But, I mean, I think the best thing that, a couple can do is obviously be together, um, throughout their pregnancy and then, plan to continue to be together postpartum, and then not be afraid to utilize, like, the tools, right? Like, okay, like, yes, breastfeeding is gonna be great. You may want to just breastfeed, but is that gonna be realistic? Because realistically, that's gonna mean you're up with the baby every 2 hours breastfeeding. You're gonna want dad to help, then you're gonna get mad that he's not helping, but then also you're not letting him help. So let's talk about let's have a reality check here, right? Like, let's talk about reality. Like, yes, you may want to do that, and that's all good and well, and I admire you, and I think that's great that you wanna do that, but reality is, let's say you were up for 2 hours and you did breastfeed the baby, and then you fed him, and then, they whatever you had left, you pumped out kinda thing, and you just started pumping every time you could kinda thing. Let's say the baby's sleeping, you just wanna let the baby sleep for a couple extra an extra hour or so, they're fine, they don't need to be changed, they're just sleeping, they're quiet kinda thing, just get up and pump and, have some bottles ready for dad, because that's the best way that a dad can help, and if a baby's crying while you're trying to feed it, oh, well, yeah, that's good, okay, that's okay. You'll get through it. Promise you will. It's okay. Um, but I
And
think
I
it's
think it's also okay. I think one thing that moms need to learn is that it's okay to leave a dad with a crying baby, and
yeah,
milk does not always have to be the answer. If the
no,
baby has had enough, and babies will cry sometimes even after they've had enough. Sometimes they just need to be held and they need that co-regulation of somebody else. And in that effort of working through those cries and, like bouncing for hours and doing all the things that you do as
mhm.
parents, it's really important to let the dad work through that with the child as
Yeah,
well.
he doesn't need to be saved. He doesn't need to be
Right.
saved. Let him struggle. Like, it's okay if he struggles. Believe it or not, he's got it. Believe it or not.
And I know it's really hard. You hear your baby cry and you're like, oh my God, it's only me. I've got this. I can do it better. Or like,
Yeah,
yeah, probably if you put the baby to the breast, they'll be like soothed no matter what. But if they have had enough, if you know they've had enough, really deep bonds are built in that time of working through it in those hard moments.
yeah. Yeah, that's why it's a team effort. It's a team sport, right?
Yeah.
As kids get older, they show that they need both parents more and more as they go through
Mhm.
different phases of development, and so that should be a pretty clear indicator that they need even in this earliest phase of development, they need both.
Mhm.
And then the likelihood that a dad's gonna be a little more rested is a little bit higher, so they're gonna have a little bit more patience, I think, with the baby. Even if the baby's crying, I think a mom's gonna have less patience, so then we get into we start to tread into waters of, shaking babies and things like that, and the irritability, things like that coming out that I think are really dangerous. So I think if you need to be able to recognize those things in yourself as well. For women, the sadness, the fearfulness, the anxiety, the emotional overwhelm, the, crying spells, the, physical, the hormonal changes, the identity transformation, things like that. Like there's a lot of things that come to women as well.
Yeah, and it's okay. I think it's okay to be messy in the postpartum because you're learning so much in newborns. Well, you
Absolutely.
are a family going through a lot, and
Yeah.
that needs to be recognized. I
Yeah.
do want to say, though, I worked with this one family that, I was working with them with their second baby, and when I came to do their home visit for their second prenatal, I always do in their home, and a lot of people would kind of show me their, like, setup for the baby, and this dad was, like, so sweet. He was like, their first baby had their, like, days and nights reversed for a really long time, and he was like, "I'm the one that can go without sleep better." And so he had this whole setup where he had, like, a baby carrier, one of those, like, yoga balls you sit on. He had
Mhm.
his, video game set up. He had recruited his friends to stay up with him through the night. He was like, "I know it's gonna be okay the first, like, week or 2, but, like, our last baby didn't, like, suddenly start sleeping, like, it needed
Mhm.
to be bounced and rocked through the night." And it was, like, so sweet because he had this whole system set up so that it could be sustainable for him to regularly take the night shift. He was like, "Take the baby to mom to feed, and then I come back and I do the soothing." And it was, like, the cutest, most thoughtful thing ever.
Mhm.
Probably not sustainable for every family, but if you have paternity leave and you have time
Yeah,
off
if you can do something similar to that, I think it's great, and I think
or
it
swim bedtime or, like yeah,
something. Yeah, something. And I think men are a little bit more equipped to go without, that sleep and whatnot. Like I can stay up. I can function on, 4, 6 hours. I'll be okay. I'll be fine. Will
but
I
I
be
can't.
as productive? No. But will I be fine towards the end of the day? Yeah, I'll still be fine. I'll still get through my day. It's not gonna it's not gonna make or break me, right? Kind of thing. So I can run on those like fumes and things like that. And I'll be fine. I'll be fine. Is it sustainable for a long period of time? No. But is this a long period of time that we're talking about? No. Like, in the grand scheme of things, like, it is gonna be, an adjustment period, but I think overall, like, I think the best thing you can do is plan, like, your routines and start those routines, like, day 1 kinda thing. Know what to expect, right? Like, know, "Okay, like, I'm gonna do this part," and then, like, if you can get some of your friends as a man, like, on board with you, like, that kinda fires you up and gets you more excited for it.
I thought that was the coolest thing that they all had their, like, headsets and they took, like they had different nights worked out.
Yeah, no, I think that's the best thing that you can do. I think that's the best thing you can do because that's also gonna help you as a dad, right? Just be able to, like, cope and things like that. Because if you're just sitting there and you have a baby carrier and a baby on your chest, like, you can still do things, right? Like,
Mhm.
I've done that. I did that with my daughters and things like that. Because, I mean, I got divorced and my youngest was 4, 5 months old kinda thing. So, I basically had a newborn that I was raising, like, as a single parent, so that was a whole experience. And so it's like you can do those things. I mean, it's just a baby. All you have to do is, I mean, if you like to do desk work, you just may have to sit a little further away from your desk kinda thing
Yeah.
to leave
It's
room for
not
the
super
baby.
comfy, but it is possible.
It's not super comfy, it's not gonna be most ideal, but it is possible kinda thing, and it's something that can be done. So you really just have to set up the system, like, for yourself, um, and stuff, yeah. And I did wanna mention too, like, how we kinda talked about some of, like, the early signs, but I did also wanna mention, like, how it does actually show up in men
Yes.
as well, 'cause I think that's important to hit on. So men often will externalize versus women who will internalize the depression. So most women will experience, postpartum as sadness, tearfulness, anxiety, emotional overwhelm, where men will experience as anger, irritability, emotional numbness, impulsivity, escape behaviors, and this often leads to it being missed because symptoms don't look like depression. And then next is men will lean toward numbing or avoidant. So where women may cry or talk it through, men will more often cope through alcohol, substances, gaming, scrolling, excessive work, or isolating. It's self-medication disguised as "I just need a break." I just need to disconnect. I just need to decompress. I just need to this. I just need to that kind of thing. To the point to where it quickly can become excessive. I think there's a link. I would have to ask a couple friends of mine, but I do think there's a link in this postpartum phase for dads, and then substance use or addiction coming in quickly then after during this same phase. I want to say there's some strong links there because it would make a lot of sense. Another one is, postpartum is often shows up in dads 3 to 12 months after birth. Actually, this is one I don't agree with. This is just like a common thing compared to women, but I mean, I think it's there from second trimester at the earliest. I think first trimester, you're kinda fired up, you're a little bit more anxious, but then second, third trimester, it kinda all sets in, especially as you start to get closer. So I think 3 to 6 months before the baby's born. It's really when it starts to set in and the early signs are there that we talked about.
And I think, there's so much to be said about recognizing the early signs versus
Mhm.
the late signs, because if you
Absolutely.
think about, like, yeah, when things are really bad, it's easy to see, but that initial phase of, like, disconnection between partners can be written off as, like, so many other things when it's truly like, "No, this is a diagnosable sign of postpartum depression."
Absolutely. A couple more here, and then identity shock hits men differently. So mom experienced the physical, the hormonal, and identity transition up front, where dads will experience the pressure to provide, feeling replaced, especially if it's first child, loss of couple connection, especially if it's first child, loss of personal time, especially if it's first child, fear of failure, but no space to say it. I think that's with every single child that comes in. That's always there. That's always going to be there. And I think that's normal. I think that's good to have that because if you don't have that, I think you're doing something wrong. Personally, I think that's good to have that fear of failure, but then also being able to talk about it, I think is a caveat there. If you're not saying it, if you're not finding spaces to say that in. Last one is men mask instead of express. So women are more culturally supported in expressing postpartum struggles, where men are expected to be strong. So they mask their symptoms with humor, confidence, stoicism. I'm good. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. Worry about her. She's the important one. She's the one that just had the baby, this, that, and the other. Phrases like that are super common. So because of the mask, postpartum in dads is caught later when the symptoms have already hardened into deeper anxiety, depression, or avoidance. And so if you're thinking about this, if the most common statistic is 3 to 12 months, tack on another 3 to 6 months on top of that. So now you're looking anywhere from 6 to 18 months, 6 months prior to the baby, and then 18 months. So a total 18-month span, 6 months prior to a year after birth. That's a long time for anyone, any person to go without having their mental health treated, especially new signs, symptoms kind of thing. That's where it's quickly gonna lead, and I don't know the lead time, and everyone's different too, but that's where you start to think about, you know, suicide becoming more of a risk, especially if a dad's older. Older men, are at a higher risk. Middle-aged men who are having babies, I think, are already at a higher risk. Uh,
Oh, I didn't know that.
White middle-aged men are one of the highest risks of suicide in the States. And so, yeah. So race plays into it, age plays into it, all these things play into it kinda thing.
So, what is somebody supposed to say if they're pregnant, they're kind of feeling like their partner is withdrawing and they want to say, like, hey, something doesn't feel right, but it's just coming out as more expectations and then contributing more to the problem? Is there a way out of that cycle?
I think there's always a way out, right? And I think you have to catch it early, right? And if you don't and you're already in that cycle, I think men need to know, like, it's okay to ask for help. Like, it is 100% okay to ask for help. But if you're looking to help a man, like, out of this cycle and you know him and you're close to him, get him moving, get him talking. I think the best thing, a mother can do, a supportive partner can do, a wife, someone that just loves the father of her child can do is, have a relationship with his friends, brothers, whoever's, like, really close to him, the other men in his life, and talk to them and say, "Hey, can you get him out of the house for a little bit? Like, can you get him moving? Can you get him, like, distracted," kinda thing? Like, get it planned and done, like, for him. I know it sounds like, "Oh, well, why do I have to do more work? That's for him," kinda thing. If you want an engaged father and a healthy father, I think that's a very simple thing that you can do. Not asking much, it's a simple call. You probably already know his dad, his brother, his friends, things like that. It's not gonna be that uncomfortable, and I think that's the best thing you can do is get him connected, and then once he's connected to those people, then they'll get out, they'll do something, maybe they'll golf, maybe they'll fish, maybe they'll do something and they'll get moving, right? A best way to get a man talking is to get him moving.
Okay.
Kinda thing, and so get him moving, get him out, get him a change of scenery, get him out of that space kinda thing, reassure him, and then, "Dad, you can do the same thing with, like, with the mother too, right?" You know, have her go out with her mom or her sister or friends or whoever, right? And be like, "You know what? I got this for."
That often goes unfulfilled is needing their community and
Mhm.
needing help getting connected to their community or being able to leave.
Or getting reconnected
Yes.
to it, right? Especially if, like, a mom's a little bit younger and maybe she's the first one in her friend group to have a
Mhm.
baby, kinda thing. So getting reintegrated into that kinda thing. And I think if you're friends of someone and they're the first one in the friend group to have a baby, I think you need to be like the friends of that father that you shared, right? Be willing to take on, like, the game time, be willing to, play games with your friend late at night kinda thing. You're gonna be doing it anyways. But, be supportive in the ways that you can, right? Don't shun your new parent friends kinda thing, because it's already kinda like a lonely, like, thought and whatnot, like, going into this phase because you don't know who is gonna be there, but if you can show that you're supportive and you're gonna be on board with, on them and you're gonna support them and it's not really gonna change the friendship, it's not really gonna change the relationship too much, anything like that, then go for it. Still be friends, things like that. I think it's awesome, and I think when the friend group of the person who just had the first one to have a baby engages with that, I think that dramatically increases the likelihood that more babies are coming in the next few years, more too. So, because everyone gets engaged, they see it, they see how much fun it is, and they just, are just so happy and they're like so involved. And I think it's so cool kind of things.
Yeah. It is crazy how life with a newborn can be so overwhelming, but it can also be so much fun. And sometimes it's like both at the same time. And we have this crazy capacity to have both a duality of emotions of being like so excited and so in love with the newborn, but also so overwhelmed by all the things. It doesn't always have to be one or the other. And having like the negative feelings doesn't necessarily mean that the positive ones aren't also there.
No, 100%. And they are there, right? Sometimes it's harder to get to the positive, but you have to get through the negative first. Sometimes the positive fades and the negative comes in, and you have to learn to balance that. I think you don't know what you don't know too, and that's why there has to be information out there, like talked about, willing to research. And I think you also need to know yourself well enough as well to be able to recognize, like, oh, I'm feeling off and this is weird and kind of thing, and then it all kind of clicks and whatnot. So I think it's all super important.
What would you say in the case where, like, one part of a couple wants to go to therapy or feels disconnected enough that they are reaching out for help like that, but the other person doesn't want to? I've seen it go both ways. Sometimes I see dads in therapy, and working really hard on their mental health, and sometimes I see moms, but it seems like in a lot of cases, it's just one part of a couple that
Yeah,
comfortable going into that space.
yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to, like the comfortability of going into that space. You can't force the other person into it as much as you want to. You just can't. And so I think that's where you need to focus and really realize, like, okay, well, maybe not yet, but maybe someday, and kind of hold that hope there kinda thing and kinda leave the invitation open kinda thing, until, like, that other person may be ready, willing to take that step. But really, I think that's a great space for you to work on, like, yourself and to focus on just, on yourself and your own day to day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. I think it's tremendously difficult to be around somebody. And I will say this for both couples because I know like when I was pregnant and postpartum, sleep deprived, I was also irritable. You use that word for men, but I was like, yeah, that was like a good like that word described me actually pretty well. And I see that in couples and I think that in you described it in men too. And I think that if you're continually living day in and day out with somebody who's struggling with postpartum depression or who is displaying like constant irritability, you need help whether or not the other person's coming with you. And I think it's really important that like that's how both people don't end up, where there's space for the struggling party to heal, is if the other person is getting very grounded and very safe and opening the doors and even setting boundaries when needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other side picks up on that. So, Susie, this has been fun. Again, I'm glad we did this again. I'm glad we got to talk again. Um, I'm gonna wrap us up. I appreciate you. I appreciate this conversation. I think there's so much goodness in this conversation. I think it's so needed to have these conversations about this because it's not an everyday conversation.
Mm-mm.
These conversations are few and far between, but I think the more that they're had, the more important they are. For the listener, we're going to skip down to the CTRA for this episode. Our CTRAs are our clear takeaway, reflection, and action. So the takeaway I hope you have for this is postpartum depression doesn't care about your gender. Moms and dads both feel the weight of new parenthood. Healing starts with honesty, support, and understanding that no one is meant to navigate postpartum alone. Your reflection for this week is what part of postpartum, your expectations, your emotions, or your past experiences needs compassion instead of judgment. And then your action is tonight, ask your partner or yourself, how are you really doing? Then listen without fixing, comparing, or minimizing. Sometimes healing begins with one honest conversation. I think that's all it takes. Listen without trying to fix, compare, or minimize. And you guys can download Susie's first trimester checklist. I'm going to get this pulled up here. It's coming. You guys can do that at uh, learn.shebirthsbravely.com/ first trimester checklist. I'm gonna pull it up here. I'll also link it in the description. But for you to see it, this is exactly what it looks like up here on the screen. You can put in your name, your email, and it all pops up right there. You can download the checklist as well, and then yeah, a lot of great stuff that Susie does. A lot of great resources. A lot of really cool, easy to follow things as well. Something to keep in mind there. And then Susie, they can also follow you on Instagram at She Births Bravely, your website, shebirthsbravely.com.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah. And so with that, Susie, huge thank you again for returning to the Young Dad podcast and diving deeper into a topic that impacts more families than we realize. If today's episode encouraged you or made you feel seen, share it with a parent who might be struggling quietly. And of course, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, keep showing up with love and intention. This is the Young Dad podcast. I'm your host, Jay. Make sure you throw away your trash and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you so much for having me.